Well, good day to everyone, and thank you for inviting me to speak here today. I want to begin by thanking the president of NCAI for his courtesy and for the invitation, and of course thank the executive committee and Jacqueline and her very dedicated staff here at NCAI. I want to thank you for your leadership, your honesty when it comes to dealing with issues in Congress, and the partnership. And I think it's important to thank you also for the unity that is being forged and is forged in Indian country on the essential, vital, and critical issues that afflict your people. And that unity is powerful, it's resounding, and you should be congratulated for that. I'll try to keep the remarks brief, but having been in Congress as long as I have been, brief it's not always what works out. So it's not that I have a lot to say, but I have a lot to say. It's kind of ironic. I'm speaking to you on Columbus Day. And I thought about that. And I think that our country and its people have to address some very honest and very difficult truths. And our nation has a collective amnesia about its history. A history of colonialism, exploitation, forced removals of Native people that followed Christopher Columbus's contact in the Americas, and has and continues to carry consequences that manifest themselves in negative ways in Indian country. And I don't think we can begin to address our nation's wounds without first acknowledging the many instances of violence, mistreatment, neglect inflicted on Native peoples by non-natives of the United States, and yes, indeed, by our own government, in the name of progress and destiny. I don't think we can begin to heal our nation's wounds without honoring and recognizing those who have given so much to enrich this nation of ours, as Native people have for generations and generations. The heritage of Native people is intertwined and forever linked with our own heritage as a nation. It's part of our national identity. So I think it's appropriate to honor it today and every day. So happy Indigenous Peoples Day. Real quickly, let's talk about, I think, vital issues that speak to the reality of Indian country in this nation and the challenges that we face collectively as we go forward. First of all, I think, is tribal sovereignty, a very sacred, understood, legal responsibility the United States government has to Native nations and to Native people, sovereignty. And there's been an effort recently to begin to erode that sovereignty. Now, let me just use two examples. The chairman of our Resources Committee, Chairman Bishop, and his tribal recognition bill. His legislation would take away the Secretary of Interior's recognition authority and leave it all to an act of Congress as the only path forward for recognition. Congress already has that right, and it's been used in the past many times, but this can't be the only avenue available. The Interior recognition process, despite the length, the time, the rigorous, time-consuming process that it is based on science and a thorough investigation, and that process is available. It should be available. Taking that process away, and this is where the danger really lies, and leaving it solely as an act of Congress as the only option, I think, is only going to cause more delays and increase difficulty for tribes. And worst of all, we will leave tribal recognition decisions to a victim of political whims. Who contributes to who? Who did you support the last time around? And this county doesn't want that tribe recognized. Does trust land then become part of this process as well? You're opening a Pandora's box that doesn't need to be open, and that was one of the pieces of legislation that I believe is a direct erosion of the issue of sovereignty. The other bill was, again, by Chairman Bishop. He is one of creative ideas. It was his misguided public lands initiative in Utah. And I believe that it was just a little thinly disguised ploy to try to subvert or prevent any monument designation for Bears Ears. But a lot of harmful provisions in it. But center to it, it would mandate a land exchange between the state of Utah and the federal government that has the potential to convey without review, without consultation, without consideration, 100,000 acres of Ute reservation. This is unprecedented, a horrible precedent for the future, the giveaway of Indian assets, and again, an affront and an erosion of sovereignty. Instead, we in Congress should be addressing the real issues that Indian country has brought to us and dealing with the real issues that affect the daily lives of Indian people in this country. Tertiary fix, 6 years, nothing, as it languishes there. We should be addressing the funding shortfalls in healthcare, education that are causing serious harm and preventing the capacity that our young people have to really grow and prosper. We should be dealing with those shortfalls. We should be expanding self-governance and self-determination by incentivizing in one area economic development opportunities on Indian land. We should be dealing with the scourge of poverty, high infant mortality rates, suicide, dependencies and abuse, and the list of problems are there and they're real. And they're long and they're unaddressed. Instead, what do? We waste valuable time talking about legislation that is not going to go anywhere. We already have a commitment from President Obama. If they pass it in the lame duck, it's not going anywhere. He would veto it. It's not going to get out of the Senate. So why don't we deal with something real? And that is the pledge that we should make to each other, that we address the greatest need and the greatest threat and quit fooling around with these other issues that are going nowhere and erode the fundamental issue of sovereignty. The other thing is, for me, is the real need going forward to protect sacred sites, whether it's Dakota Access, Oak Flats, other areas. It is what is happening at Standing Rock is an example, I think, of a long and dishonorable history of pushing the impacts of pollution into the most economically and politically disadvantaged people and communities across this country. It is also about a trust responsibility to tribes, about tribal sovereignty, about treaty obligations, about the moral and legal obligation to protect sacred sites, Native American cultural resources, and about the access to safe drinking water and indeed environmental justice. Despite the recent court decision that lifted the temporary injunction regarding the pipeline, I think the Obama administration needs to hold firm until a full EIS is done, until a full investigation and consultation occurs with the tribes in the area, until there's transparency to the fullest extent of the word. And we continue to try to save Oak Flats and Apache Leap here in Arizona from destruction due to a mining agreement. This land trade couldn't pass the House of Representatives. But in the middle of the night, on a must-pass defense bill, Senator John McCain tucked it into that bill. And now the threat to Oak Flats and Apache Leap, sacred sites, in the midst of trying to unravel and undo that. And again, I met with Washington tribe that is fighting to protect their sacred waterfalls from unchecked development that would destroy them. And there's a cumulative effect. The list goes on and on and on. We shouldn't deal. And I think that is what Standing Rock has done. A virtual line that says, no more. And it's a very powerful line because we deal with these issues in isolation. Oak Flats over here, the waterfalls, the road construction through the Gila People's Reservation, and the list goes on and on and on. And as long as we deal with them in isolation, it's very difficult to stop many of them. But if we look at the cumulative assault on sacred sites, historic and religious and cultural resources that is affecting Indian country, then we have a bigger picture. And to the Standing Rock Sioux and all of you that are supporting them, thank you. You brought that to the light of day, and I anticipate that what we're going to do there in the long run is turn the discussion of consultation completely around and turn the discussion of sovereignty in a good and positive direction for Indian country. So you should all be very proud. We have a legislation that we've been working with the administration for a while. I want to thank NCAI for endorsing the objectives of the RESPECT Act at your meeting in San Diego. Thank you so much. We're working with the administration, but essentially the RESPECT Act is about codifying into law what consultation means, so that it's not discretionary to federal agencies. That by law you will do the following: pre-information, consultation, and an avenue for redress for tribes. And I think the recent actions that I just spoke about earlier are proof that we need strong tribal protections and judicial remedies in any consultation law. It can't be as it's been, where you put something up on a bulletin board and say we consulted. It's got to be pre-noticed, information in your hands prior to a meeting, transparency, consensus efforts, mediation if necessary, but there will be a uniform checklist that every agency, whether it's Army Corps or the Department of Health, they need to follow. I think it's only fair that everybody is on the same playing field together. About, I'm gonna jump, when we had I heard many times when I went to Standing Rock about water is life. And one of the most powerful and moving visits that I've ever made anywhere. And when we had our hearing to allow Standing Rock Sioux and others to come and address us in DC, Gracie Claymore, a member of the Standing Rock Youth Council, said something really, really important. I just want to quote her directly. She said, teenage young woman, very, very bright. And she said, we have this ceremony in our way of life, and it's called the sun dance. In that time, we go without food and water for 4 days. I apologize if I cry. I cannot talk about this without crying. But I've been involved in this since I was a little girl. I know what it's like to go without water for 4 days, and that can soon become my reality. What am I going to tell my little siblings if this pipeline comes in to ruin our waters? What am I going to tell them? What am I going to say to them? Am I going to say, oh, wait, you have to wait for water? I cannot say that to them. We have been investigating now for the committee for a few months the question of tribal water access in detail. And today there will be at the staff table a copy of the report. We're releasing the report today that shows that 48%, nearly half of all homes on reservations across this country do not have access to reliable water sources, clean drinking water, or basic sanitation. That's nearly 191,000 dwellings. Conservative estimate, over 600,000 people affected. When I saw those figures, I made everybody double and triple check it. You know, this can't be right. And that's the number. And the data is straight from Indian Health Services. Sometimes, and so why do we have this situation? We know what the cost involved to people are: health and the adverse effects caused by contaminated water, the lack of reliability in water, economic development. Why would businesses, enterprises want to set their sites and their production in an area in which they can't count on the reliability of water? Child development, education, all those things are affected in a very direct way. And why? So the question for us became, why is water access so low? It's because tribes don't have is it because tribes don't have a legal right to their water? Of course not. The law and the courts have conclusively determined that tribes have a legal right to enough water to sustain their reservations as a permanent homeland. In fact, federal government is legally obligated to protect tribal water rights from non-Indian neighbors who encroach on water supplies that the tribe will need. Unfortunately, the federal government has failed miserably in protecting those rights, and time again. So what does the tribe do? They have to sue to exercise their water rights. Sometimes they do, takes decades, it's expensive, and doesn't address the other major barrier to usable water: money, resources for that infrastructure in order to have a delivery system that reaches everyone. And tribes and non-Indian tribe users, states and federal governments tend to agree the best way to go is through water settlements. They make sense. There's two waiting right now to be decided by Congress. And so what happens? And we found out, and it's part of this report, that found out in 38 years since the first water settlement was approved, only 17% of the settlements have been enacted when the majority party, this is the Republican Party, in controlling both houses. 72% when the minority party, in this instance, the Democrats now, were in control. And it's even gotten worse. In the last 6 years, since 2011, Congress has not funded one single Indian water rights settlement, despite, like I said, numerous settlement bills being introduced and two waiting. So the point I'm making today is that that settlement process has to be opened up. It has to be part of what we do as a Congress to assure that, for the sake of health, economic development, and the sustainability of Indian country, water settlements and water availability and affordability for a delivery system has to be a priority. And we intend to make that one of the priorities that we go into next session. The last thing I want to talk about, and I told you I was going to talk long, is Antiquities Act. There's a lot of acts under attack right now to try to undo them, from NEPA to Clean Air, Clean Water, to endangered species, historic preservation, rewriting sacred sites, rewriting cultural resources. And the Antiquity Act, with particular glee, is something that people want to get rid of. And the presidential authority to designate monuments that conserve and preserve waterways and lands on existing federal land. And in these last 100 days, this administration that has been good to work with, shown leadership others haven't shown, has an opportunity to permanently stamp a legacy going into the future in terms of monument designation. The nexus is Native people. The core is Native people, protecting sacred sites, religious practice areas, cultural and historic resources, etc. Here in Arizona, it's the great Bennett the Gila that is very important, and all the Native nations in Arizona have endorsed that. Bears Ears In the Utah area, again, essential, and the nexus being Native people. And also here, and not just for Arizona, Grand Canyon Heritage Monument that we've been working on with the tribes and the affiliated tribes to the Grand Canyon now for a while. This monument designation and the template that we presented to Interior is driven by Native people. The consultation process was not just consultation, it was a collaborative effort to put something together that represented the desires of affiliated tribes to this Grand Canyon. And we did that with collaboration, joint advisory on management of a monument, and an elevated role in terms of how that monument is managed, how it's protected, and how it's utilized to the benefit of all, but specifically to the ongoing benefit and legacy of Native people associated with the Grand Canyon. And we're very proud of that. And we are urging Interior and the White House to make that a lasting legacy and make it a monument, protect the watershed, protect sacred sites, ban uranium mining permanently from around the Grand Canyon. That's in essence what we're trying to do. And I hope Interior listens, because this is one in which we have been very conscious of who should lead this effort, and it's been Indian country. And we're also very conscious that John McCain is opposed to it. Hope that doesn't frighten anybody in Interior. And we are also Interior has indicated that they haven't heard enough from Indian country regarding the Grand Canyon Monument and other monument designations important to Native people. Please let them know you care. Please let them know you support it, so that there won't be an excuse down the line for lack of action. So in closing, let me just thank you, as I did earlier, indicate to you that I think we're going in a very, very, very important next 2 or 3 years. Not only is this election important, a watershed election for this nation, but the presence, the role, the profile, and the influence of Indian country on national policy and the policy that affects your communities and your people is only going to grow. So let's redefine what sovereignty means. Let's get a consultation system that's respectful and includes equity and equal treatment and fairness. And let's, above all, understand that the greatest partners that the United States has in preserving its legacy, its heritage, and the cycle of life that's important to all of us is Native people and Indian country. And for your leadership, your example, and your strength, thank you very much.